Today we're going to take a look at the 1950s, which is an interesting decade. After World War II, we're going to see some significant changes in the lifestyles. A couple of things that are going to be happening will be the civil rights movement. This is a picture of Rosa Parks sitting in the front of the bus, which was completely illegal. She did get arrested for it, but that was to show that African Americans could sit and do whatever they wanted. They wanted equal rights, but they didn't want separate facilities. Take a look at the Little Rock 9 video. It's pretty interesting. This is also a time where the United States and the Soviet Union were in the Cold War, and there was always a constant threat of someone setting off a nuclear bomb to destroy the other country. And it created a lot of political tension. We have a baby boom in the 1950s, and this began in 1946, right after World War II. And there were about 4 million babies born every year during the 1950s. The baby boom tapers off around 1964, and there were 77 million baby boomers. In 1953, Queen Elizabeth becomes queen. She is still the reigning queen today and has surpassed Victoria as the longest reigning queen or monarch of England. Playboy came out in the 1950s. Marilyn Monroe was the first centerfold. It was a men's magazine. Do you recognize any of these? These are TV sets, and they are great. Such modern designs back in the 1950s. Some TV shows that were iconic are I Love Lucy, Father Knows Best, The Twilight Zone. These were great ways of bringing the world into your living room. There are only a few channels, channel 2, 4, or ABC, let's see, CBS, NBC, ABC, and maybe KTLA and KCOP, and maybe later on PBS. There were no remotes. Children were often the remotes for their parents. In 1955, Disneyland opened, and it just saddens me that they're closed right now. But this became the blueprint for amusement parks, and Walt Disney had this great idea to create a park where grandparents, parents, and children could all enjoy the park together. Some crazy fads that were happening during the 50s are 3D movies. We brought those back a while ago, and we still love them. It was just such a cool craze back then. Also seeing how many people you could stuff into a phone booth. We can't do that today because we don't have phone booths. And then bomb shelters. Everyone needed, or were told they needed a bomb shelter in their basements in case, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union did drop the bomb. We also see the jitterbug as a dance craze and a fad. Here are some toys. You probably had some of these during your lifetime. Silly Putty, Legos, Barbie. She was born in 1959. Matchbox cars. Teen idols became all the rage in the 1950s. Singers like Elvis, Bobby Darin, Frankie Avalon, Ricky Nelson. take a look in the modules. I put a link to watch an Elvis video. He's such a heartthrob. Top designers in the 1950s were Christian Dior, Jacques Fath, Cristobal Balenciaga, Pierre Balmain, and Chanel. There's a couple of cool videos you can watch in Canvas. The links are there. Cecil Beaton was a fashion photography, and he was able to create these amazing photographs that looked like paintings. These are some Charles James gowns, and they're just the lighting, the color, just the whole arrangement of the photograph is pretty incredible. We have the Beat Generation. This was a term coined back in 1948, and it was used to describe a generation of crazy, illuminated hipsters. They traveled, they hitchhiked, they bummed rides, and they brought this new vitality to the 1950s. They were often underground in basements and clubs. Sometimes they were called beatniks. They would have poetry readings and music recitals. And they had their own way of thinking that was very different from the mainstream society. Here's James Dean and Elvis, and they represented this Beat generation. We also are going to see the Teddy Boys and the Teddy Girls, and this was kind of a throwback to Edwardian fashions. They called them Neo-Edwardian. They were seen as dangerous, badass. It was a subculture, and they didn't really espouse the philosophies or the emotions of the time. They wanted to be different. They set the way for punks and hippies. They had their own convictions, and every person could have their own set of values. And they just really wanted to change the way society looked at the youth. There's so much more to the 50s, and we'll talk about more as we look at the men's garments and the women's garments.